Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Prime Minister Trudeau's Chief of Staff will testify at a committee investigating alleged foreign interference in Canada's elections. The Alberta government announced that $80 million worth of children's flu medicine is now available in local pharmacies. And 70 migrants listed on the FBI's terrorist screening dataset watch list were taken into custody. Our Foreign Affairs expert Lisa Daftari has the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's Chief of Staff will testify before a Commons Ethics Committee investigating alleged foreign interference in the last two federal elections. The move will end weeks of the Liberals trying to prevent Katie Telford from testifying.
Obviously, it goes to how important the issue of foreign interference is, and I'm actually, pleased to contrast the approach that we've taken, which is with terms of reference for the rapporteur that's going to be coming out later today. People will see that there is an expert process that will dig into this in a nonpartisan way, and people can contrast this with the kind of political circus that Mr. Poilievre is trying to generate.
Trudeau added that former Governor General David Johnston will have until May 23rd to complete his investigation into alleged foreign interference and recommend if added steps, including a public inquiry, are necessary. Trudeau says if Johnston recommends an inquiry, he will abide by it. Federal Families Minister Karina Gould offered an update on Tuesday on her government's efforts to resolve delays in the processing of passport applications. Gould says adding more staff has been helping to alleviate the backlog.
Service Canada brought on new staff and accelerated their training, with the operational workforce almost doubling from 1,365 employees in March 2022 to 2,631 as of the end of February. Service Canada also added processing capacity and streamlined operations to bring the system back to stability. And today, passports are delivered within the service standards over 99% of the time. This work also got us ready for the growth in volume we expect this year, as the first passports with 10-year validity become eligible for renewal.
Federal Immigration Minister Sean Fraser says Canada will make it easier for temporary residents from both Turkey and Syria to extend their stays in Canada. Officials will also prioritize the visa applications of refugees from both countries.
We're using new technologies within our system to ensure that more of these people will be approved to come to Canada, despite the fact that there are ordinarily barriers that prevent people from around the world from coming here successfully. In addition to making it easier for people to come and be reunited with their families in Canada, we're also introducing new measures for people who are already in Canada that will make it easier for them to stay. In particular, we're going to allow people who are here in Canada to apply for extensions, cost-free, to remain in this country. We're also going to create an opportunity for people who are here temporarily to apply for open work permits that could allow them to stay for up to 3 years. We're also making it easier for people to move between temporary streams. So if you're here temporarily as a visitor, a student, or a worker, you can more easily transition to one of the other temporary streams that make it easier to remain in Canada.
Well, spring is in the air and looking pretty good so far here in southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early look at the forecast. Jeanette, we may even hit double-digit temperatures later this week.
Yeah, we sure could, Hal. Right now, Thursday's forecast is expected to be 10 degrees, so we'll see if we make it there. Meantime, Wednesday, we'll almost be there on Wednesday. 8 degrees is the expected high. This evening, though, still a little low for this time of year. We're looking at an overnight low of -11. Add a 20K wind to that, and we're seeing a wind chill value of -16 overnight and into early tomorrow morning. Mainly sunny skies, though. For the rest of the week, I'll be back later in the show to give you that 7-day forecast.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Alberta Premier Daniel Smith says the first shipment of children's pain and fever medication that was ordered months ago from a Turkish manufacturer is now available in pharmacies. The province ordered more to help overcome severe shortages during the height of the flu season. It had to clear regulatory, safety, and quarantine rules, however, before it could be made available in Alberta. The cost to taxpayers is about $80 million, or about $14 per bottle.
The wait is over. Help is now here. Children's acetaminophen is now available for distribution to local pharmacies, and we hope this brings much-needed peace of mind to parents everywhere, and parents can feel confident that we have secured a stable supply of this medication for years to come, ensuring that Alberta isn't as susceptible to global supply chain disruptions in the future. I want parents to know that your government has heard you, and I truly hope that this supply will provide a little bit more comfort and relief to you and your families.
Health Minister Jason Copping says the province plans to subsidize the cost of the medicine to keep it competitive with other brands. You know, the shortage of pain and fever medication for kids has been a very stressful time for families. This has not only put a strain on the hospitals, but also pharmaceutical staff who carry the medication. The owner of the medicine shop here in Lethbridge, near the Chinook Regional Hospital, says during the fall season, they really struggled to keep the meds on the shelves and had to resort to an alternative form of kids' Tylenol.
Fall had been terrible. During fall and during Christmas time, we parents were so much worried, anxious, and what was happening. Right now, it's pretty much resolved, I would say, because we still have 8 or 9 bottles of Tylenol suspension sitting on shelf. We have Advil suspension kits, but it was terrible at that time, and what we had to do is we had to do compounding of Tylenol and Advil liquid, and it is a short expiry, it expires in a month, so you had to consume it, while the commercially made available, it has a longer expiry.
Staff at the medicine shop say they're not sure how many bottles of pain and fever medication they will be receiving, but any amount will be a welcome sight for parents. A new online course will help rural healthcare providers in Alberta to better support victims of sexual assault. The Parliamentary Secretary for the Status of Women, Tanya Furr, says $1 million in funding helped Grand Prairie's Northwestern Polytechnic develop the specialized training. It teaches healthcare providers how to provide comprehensive, trauma-informed care to survivors of recent sexual assaults. The money will also cover the cost of the course for registered nurses, nurse practitioners, registered midwives, and doctors across rural Alberta. The Alberta government is adding an additional $2.1 million in support for Ukrainian evacuees. Officials say as of March 17th, more than 26,500 Ukrainian refugees have made their way to our province. Premier Daniel Smith says as part of Budget 2023, just over $27 million has already helped to fund language, housing, and settlement services. Immigration Minister Rajan Sani says this new funding will offer the additional support Ukrainian evacuees need right now.
It is important to ensure that evacuees have sufficient pre-arrival supports. Extra help in this area goes a long way to easing the stress of the transition on these families and individuals during an already difficult time. Second, the task force was notified that there were significant barriers to finding out about all of the programs available at each level of government. Many evacuees do not have any family or friends here to help them navigate new information, systems, and especially in a new language. The task force recognized that Alberta needs one place that Ukrainians can call and obtain help.
You know, the Alberta election is not that far away. It's coming up on May the 29th. The Alberta budget focused on a number of areas, including health care and education. Independent Cypress Medicine Hat MLA Drew Barnes says as we get closer to heading to the polls, the UCP should not lose their focus on our seniors. Barnes says more seniors' homes are desperately needed in Alberta.
I'm grateful to represent Cypress Medicine Hat for over 11 years, but one of the things that's happened when the NDP was in power, they seem to want to go mostly towards publicly owned senior citizen support places. When the Conservatives in power, we want to go more to private ones. I think it's time to make sure that all types of services, including not-for-profit, are there to support our hardworking seniors and make sure that they're there when they need to be.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Independent Cypress Medicine Hat MLA Drew Barnes and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up after Business News. Cases of sextortion are on the rise in Alberta, and Alert is sending out a warning to parents. Sextortion is a crime where predators target young teenagers, claiming they have revealing pictures or videos of the victim and will threaten to show more if their demands are not met. An official with Alert says typically the predator will target young people through online platforms like Snapchat and Omegle.
Omegle, it's the same as Snapchat. Snapchat, of course, is a lot of pictures and videos. Omegle is the same thing, along with Kik and Discord. They're all fairly similar, where The children will be contacted by the offenders. The initial conversation will be chat, and then it'll switch over to exchanging intimate images. And once the offenders have those intimate images, the threats and the extortion will start.
Officials say there are between 160 and 170 cases of sextortion in Alberta right now. Alert says typically teenage boys are the ones who are falling victim to the crime. The bodies of 2 Edmonton police officers who were shot and killed in the line of duty are set to be transported from the medical examiner's office to a funeral home in Edmonton. Police say people were encouraged to show their support by lining the route at noon on Tuesday to honor both Travis Jordan and Brett Ryan. Police say the constables were responding to a family dispute at an apartment complex last week when they were both shot multiple times by a 16-year-old boy. Police say the shooter also wounded his mother during a struggle for the gun and then shot and killed himself. A regimental funeral for the officers will be held March 27th at Rogers Place in Edmonton. Lethbridge police have arrested 2 people in connection with a shooting at a West Side home on Monday. Police say they received a 911 call at about 6:30 in the morning about a man who had been assaulted at a home along Rutgers Crescent West. When they arrived, they saw that the victim had been shot. He was taken to hospital right away. Upon further investigation, it appears as though the man confronted a man and a woman at the home. Following a verbal exchange, the woman shot the man, and the other man inside of the home also attacked the victim. The pair then drove away in the victim's truck. The 38-year-old woman and a 41-year-old man were arrested later in the afternoon and face various charges. The victim remains in hospital in stable condition. RCMP in Northern Alberta say 5 people have died in a 2-vehicle collision on Monday night. Police say it appears a pickup truck was driving north in a southbound lane on Highway 750 when it hit a minivan. 2 people in the truck, both in their 30s, were found dead at the scene. Officers say 3 other people in the minivan from Whitefish First Nation, including an 11-year-old boy, were also killed. Another child, who's the age of 5, was rushed to hospital with life-threatening injuries. Lethbridge City Council has once again declared April 7th as Green Shirt Day. The special day was created to honor those affected by the tragic Humboldt Broncos bus crash in 2018, including Lethbridge resident Logan Boulay, who died, and to encourage organ donation. Boulay donated his organs to save 6 lives. Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Higgins says it's important to highlight Boulay's story so it's never forgotten.
And sometimes we'll put things in perpetuity that is, you may forget them the following year. So to have us discuss it at the council meeting each year was something that, again, refreshed people's memories and minds on what had happened those years ago and all of those lives that were saved. And so, and the lives that were saved, but then also the organ donation. So it brings it to light again. And I've been told that it does have an influx each time this time of the year comes along, that those donations and signed, your driver's license goes up. So I think just the reminder each year is why I thought it'd be better to bring it each year. Yep.
Lethbridge City Council voted unanimously on the motion for Green Shirt Day on April the 7th. The City of Lethbridge will be rolling out their Green Bin program fairly soon. Locals who live in semi- and detached houses will begin receiving their green bins beginning next month. The first phase of the program was launched in selected areas of the city last spring. Now, city officials say it will expand to the rest of Lethbridge to help minimize waste residents are tossing out. Officials say the bins will be delivered with a kitchen pail and a user guide explaining what you can do and what you can't put into the green bin. As violence continues to escalate in Nigeria, there are more warnings of a humanitarian crisis in the making. As we hear in this next story, UK-based Release International warned if the government doesn't stop the violence, Christians in Nigeria will leave the country in droves.
Fulani militants have been sweeping northern states, firing assault rifles and burning homes, including Blessings. We've changed her name to protect her.
Fulani sun zo su mana attack. Sun kone mana gidaje duk da kayakinmu da yana ciki duka sun bi sun kokone su sun kore mu mun tafi ciki miyango mun je mun zo na waje to da ikon Allah mun da gida shine muna.
She said Nigerian soldiers stationed nearby did nothing at all to help the villagers. Others said the same.
Father of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Pastor John, we changed his name too, was at a prayer meeting when they heard gunshots. The military barracks is next to the town, but when the villagers called on the soldiers to help, Pastor John says they did nothing.
The military, we told them, we called on them. We were calling on them to come and help us with the police. What they told us clearly that their hands were tied, that they would not be able to do anything because they were not giving command from the government. In fact, they were killing some people in front of the military. They were not doing anything.
Pastor John and the others believe the attack was religiously motivated.
When they were shooting, what we heard from them is Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. We heard them clearly. So we knew actually this is Islamic Jihad coming to attack us.
I must say that this is happening under the nose of a federal government. I've done far more funerals in the last 20 years than I have done naming ceremonies or weddings put together. I'm a grieving pastor.
It's election time in Nigeria. Archbishop Kwashi says unless the new president stops the killings, Nigeria will face a refugee crisis that will impact the world.
Christians are going to run out of this country. They're going to leave in droves. They will not wait for the persecution that will happen.
Release International has named Nigeria as a key country of concern. It calls for prayer and support for the suffering church in that nation. Release International partners are providing trauma counselling for victims of violence. This is Andrew Boyd for the Global News Alliance.
Praying for the church in Nigeria. Wow. Well, lots of sunshine today for Lethbridge with mild temperatures once again. And the good news is the mercury will be climbing even further this week. A full look at the weather picture is on deck. You know, I've been seeing more and more people riding their bicycles around Lethbridge lately. And you know, why not? With all of the sunshine and warmer temperatures, it's beautiful outside. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, we could even hit double-digit plus temperatures by Thursday.
Yes, absolutely, Hal. You know, it's that strange time of year in southwestern Alberta when you can see bikers and skiers all in the same day. Okay, so we're mainly looking at plus temperatures this whole week. 8 degrees is the high on Wednesday, high of 10 degrees. There's that double digits that we were talking about. Mainly sunny skies all week, basically, through Friday, 7 degrees the high then, and then down to 3 degrees for both Saturday and Sunday. Still a decent weekend, though. High of 1 on Monday. So the average high for this time of year is 7 degrees, average low -6. We're but mostly staying in that range, sometimes even a little bit higher, a little bit lower at night, though. We're still seeing those chilly evenings and having to scrape our windows in the morning. Not fun. 21 was our high temperature on this day back in 1939, and in 2002 we saw the lowest, which was -32. 7:33, that's when the sun rose this morning, and our sun set this evening at 7:44 p.m. We are now well into the past the 12 hours of daylight mark. Okay, on the west coast tomorrow, looking at a high of 12 degrees, sunshine. Sunshine also in Vancouver, same thing, 12 degrees the high there, but 17 inland. Lovely day there. 7 the high in Edmonton, mainly sunny skies, but we're still under that special air quality statement in Edmonton. So what's happening is there's a stagnant weather pattern that's pushing pollutants down towards the surface, creating poor air quality, and it's mostly bad in the afternoons and the evenings, and that should persist all week. Otherwise, sunshine tomorrow morning. Sunny also in Calgary tomorrow with a high of 7 degrees. As we look to the rest of the prairie, seeing mainly sunny skies. -6 the high in Saskatoon, -7 in Regina, seeing some light periods of snow in the morning. In Winnipeg, that should be clearing up by the afternoon. -3 the high there. Also keep in mind wind chill values in the prairies there as well, feeling more like in the -20s in the morning, particularly looking at a 40% chance of showers tomorrow in Toronto. High of 8 degrees, 2 degrees the high in Ottawa. Mix of sun and cloud there. Partly cloudy skies in Montreal tomorrow, looking at a high of 1 degree. Over in Atlantic Canada, seeing mainly sunny skies as well there. High of 4 degrees in Fredericton, 6 in Halifax, 1 degree the high in Charlottetown, and 2 degrees the high in St. John's, Newfoundland, with a mix of sun and cloud and up to 40 winds there. There you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
Food inflation appears to be easing somewhat, but industry experts say that does not mean, however, that the price of food is falling. Stats Canada revealed that the cost of groceries rose 10.6% in February compared with the year before. That was down, however, from 11.4% year-over-year increase in January, but all that really means is that prices are rising less quickly. Experts say they think inflation will be cooling well into the summer. It's currently at 5.2%. The federal environment minister says he wants stronger links between Ottawa and Alberta when it comes to oil sands issues. Stephen Guilbeault has repeated his plan for a new body with federal and provincial members that would share information. He says it's especially important for environmental emergencies like the releases from tailings ponds at Imperial Oil's Kearl mine. In a letter to his provincial counterpart last week, Guilbeault said he wants the new body to have a say in remediation and containment of the tailings ponds and about notifications for spills and seeps. You know, one of the big business stories we featured on Bridge City News is the downfall of the Silicon Valley Bank and their alleged risky practices. American correspondent and one of our regular contributors, Lisa Daftari, says a big reason why the bank failed was because of its woke policies, which had a major impact on its bottom line.
This mismanagement of the banks. I mean, a lot of it is because of woke policy. If you're following these stories, many of these hires in the top positions were not based on merit or people who were qualified for the job, but because of quotas. They weren't based. They gave out these charities to social justice groups when they weren't in a position to give out this much charity. Why? Because they wanted to keep up with the Joneses in terms of being, of course, aware of these social justice movements and really just keep up in that way.
U.S. correspondent Lisa Daftari will also have details of how 800,000 North Korean young people say they're ready to defend their country and annihilate the United States of America. That's coming up after business news. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 135 points on the day to finish at 19,654. The Dow was up 316 points to 32,560. The S&P 500 was up 51 on the day to 4,003, and the Nasdaq was up 184 points to 11,860. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.69 to $69.33 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was up 13 cents to $2.35 U.S. Gold was even on the day at $19.40.08 U.S. an ounce, and silver was also even at $22.39 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.29 per bushel, barley's at $8.97, canola's at $16.69, and corn is at $10.54 per bushel. Live cattle April contract was up 40 cents to $162.43. Feeder cattle March contract was up 58 cents to $188.78, and lean hogs April contract was down 73 cents to $77.05. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to $72.93 U.S. Recapping one of our top stories, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's Chief of Staff will testify before a Commons Ethics Committee investigating alleged foreign interference in the last two federal elections. The move will end weeks of the Liberals trying to prevent Katie Telford from testifying. On Tuesday morning, the federal government announced that former Governor General David Johnston will also have until May 23rd to complete his investigation and recommend if added steps, including a public inquiry, are necessary. A number of migrants listed on the FBI's terrorist screening dataset watch list were arrested along the Canada-U.S. border. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will have details for us in just a moment. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. Discover how Lethbridge has played an important military role in the preservation of world peace and security by visiting the Lethbridge Military Museum at the Vimy Ridge Armory at the Lethbridge Airport. The museum is open to the public each Wednesday from noon to 4 p.m. Special arrangements for other days and times can be made by calling 403-328-6196. Admission is free, but donations are gratefully accepted. For more information, visit lethbridgemilitarymuseum.org. Lethbridge Sport Council's Indoor Roving Gyms program takes place Tuesdays at Emmanuel Lutheran Church from 6 to 7 p.m. and Thursdays at the Service Sports Center from 10 to 11 a.m. This program is for kids ages 5 and under and their caregivers. Come and enjoy an hour of fun and get active. Pre-registration is required and space is limited. For details and to register, visit lethbridgesportcouncil.ca/roving gyms. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
A new report published by U.S. Customs and Border Protection reveals that police now have apprehended 70 migrants listed on the FBI's terrorist screening data set watch list. Now, to chat about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert and host of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari, who joins us once again from soggy Los Angeles. Now, Lisa, the 5-month campaign included 69 who were taken into custody along the southwest border with Mexico between October and February, and the rest were arrested along the Canada-U.S. border.
Exactly, affecting us both. Look, this is something we've been not only warning about, but reporting about. At the Foreign Desk, we've had multiple stories over the last few years talking about how it's not just the threat of bad actors using our porous borders to get into the country, but actually happening. 70 is not a small number. When you think about these individuals having some sort of rap sheet, their names being collected on some sort of list. Now imagine how many are not on this list and also are bad actors, and exactly that, using this border to get into the country. Now, these individuals are not all from Latin America coming through the southern border. They're actually from all over the world, using the southern border because they know it's a vulnerable barrier and getting into the country. And not only that, but as far as you guys are concerned, continuing northward and getting into Canada as well. This affects our national security. It's not just a question of immigration. Now, we talk about the illegal migrants getting into the country in terms of absorption, in terms of resources. I know New York City Mayor Eric Adams is up to his ears in terms of the amount of money it is costing his city to put these migrants into fancy hotels and give them other resources. All over the country, there are lawmakers that are taking matters into their own hands because they don't trust that the White House will do right by our country in terms of controlling the sheer number of migrants coming in. Now, that isn't just a question of resources. Now we're talking about security. We're talking about bad actors getting into the country and taking advantage of our border not being secure. The second issue here is the inconsistency or lack of transparency between the White House and the Border Control. Imagine the Border Control trying to do its best to keep our country safe, to contain them from going northward into Canada, to try to control the masses. And yet the White House is singing a completely different tune and telling us that it's safe, that they're doing all that they can. So these are the issues that we're dealing with right now. But thank you for bringing attention to it, because the fact that there actually are, it's not just the threat, but there actually are bad actors coming through tells us how dangerous our borders are right now.
Isn't there more talk between our governments and the border protection agencies about proper vetting processes so we don't have a lot of undesirables coming across the border?
Right, and you would think, but there's no proper vetting process. There's no proper control. The fact that these 70 individuals were on a list is actually very surprising to me, because I think, first of all, the number is much higher than 70 of the number of bad actors coming into the country. And secondly, there's no way in many cases to vet these individuals. Just take a look at Europe and what they went through in the last decade, letting people in from all throughout the Middle East. It's not like you can call the DMV in Raqqa and say, who is this individual who just came through from Syria? They have fake documentation, in many cases not needing documentation to come through our borders, and the way that they're coming through with coyotes and all different kinds of ways and strategies of getting through. But the main point is that it is a porous border. It is a dangerous barrier that is not being watched, that the Border Control does not have control over, that they do not have the resources for. They have complained many times to the White House saying that this problem is much bigger than they can handle. They're not being paid well. They don't have proper resources. It's very hard to recruit people who want to work in the job of border control. Think about it. I mean, why would you want to work in a job that is completely thankless, that does not have proper communication with the White House, and is not allowed to do its proper job? So these are the issues that we're dealing with right now at our border.
Now, Lisa, speaking of borders, Iraq and Iran signed a border security agreement recently. It's a move officials say is meant to tighten the frontier with Iraq's Kurdish region, where Tehran says armed Kurdish rebels pose a serious threat to its security.
Yeah, of course. Every time in the Middle East, the bad guys want to go after the security threat, they mean the Kurds, because they're the only ones who are trained fighters. They're brave. They often have the weapons and are able to fight back against these insurgencies. And we saw it in Iraq. We saw it in Syria. And of course, in Iran, over the last 6 months, we've seen protests, peaceful protests by individuals going out onto the streets and saying, we want regime change. We want this regime gone. And the government had this massacre, Bloody Friday, went into the areas where Kurds live and just started shooting at people. We have some of those videos on the foreign desk. It's horrific. So the Achilles heel, or this weakness of these bad insurgencies or these terror groups inside the Middle East, are always the Kurds. And to add to that, the United States has always used, and the West has always used the Kurds as our partners on the ground. They have been our boots on the ground, again, in Syria and in Iraq. And in many cases, we have entrusted them, we've given them weapons, and they have done our dirty work. And many times we've not taken care of them the way that we should. And many times we've talked about how they should be protected after they complete their jobs and after they stand up for us, because as you can see, the fixation by groups like the insurgencies in Iraq or Iran, and the Turks, of course, are to go after the Kurds. And for that reason, they need more protection, and they need more communication with the West.
Lisa, the U.S. Senate recently heard that Iran's nuclear breakout time is now under 2 weeks. How concerning is this?
You know, we have heard reports that it's 2 weeks, as you just said, 2 days, 2 hours, 2 months. The bottom line being they either have the bomb or they're very close to getting it. And what have we done about that, right? Think about this. And I want to rewind a bit to 2015. President Obama got us into the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA. And that deal was to contain Iran's weapons program from going forward. It was to get transparency, to get inspectors in there, to know what they're up to in terms of their nuclear program, and to not make it secret anymore. And that did not happen. They kept it secret. They did not let the inspectors from the UN go in there. They were enriching uranium above the percentage that was allowed, and they were continuing to march forward with the desire to have a nuclear weapon. Now, Donald Trump pulled out of that deal because he believed it was just a piece of paper that was meaningless in its being effective. And then President Biden campaigned on the fact that he's going to blindly get right back into the deal. And that's what they have been trying to do. Now, the White House has taken a step back from going forward with the JCPOA, but they are still talking about diplomacy with Iran's regime. And guess what, Hal? Nowadays, we know that they are enriching uranium upwards of 80%. We know that they have tried everything in their power to get the parts of the weapons program that they needed for delivery system. And the list goes on. So again, they either have the weapon, they're very close to getting it. We know that. How many times do experts have to warn the White House that this is what's going on? And it does not change any hearts and minds. I just came back from Washington, D.C. 2 weeks ago. I did several briefings for lawmakers, and it seems as though they are still of the mindset that this regime can be friendly, that we can appease them, that we can have diplomacy. They love to use diplomacy when it comes to Iran's regime. But these are the facts that actually should be underscored. The fact that they have gone forward with a nuclear weapon, the fact that they want a nuclear weapon. They're still putting billions of dollars into global terror and supporting terror groups throughout the region. They're still shooting down at peaceful protesters and killing teenagers on the streets for coming out in protest. So why are we trying to use the diplomacy word with this regime? That's what a lot of Iranians and those who support them are trying to bring to the attention of the White House right now.
North Korea is claiming that 800,000 young people have volunteered to enlist in the military to fight the United States. Now, a number of working young people say they're willing to defend their country and annihilate the enemy. This as Korean and American forces engage in 11 days of joint military drills.
Right. It's an interesting story, right? Volunteered. I didn't think there was any free will left in North Korea, but they're claiming that these people came forward and want to fight for their country. Look, maybe that's the case. When you isolate people long enough, they kind of go crazy and start rallying around their own flag. That's potentially true. But the bigger story here and the biggest takeaway here is how a weak foreign policy coming from the United States and the West right now, this failure to lead, the failure to have this kind of leadership role in global order leads to our enemies raising their hands and saying, me too, we're gonna kind of stick it to the United States as well. And here we go. China, Russia, Iran's regime, North Korea, and the list goes on, right? So this is a big message to anyone who is in office right now. A strong foreign policy from Washington, D.C. trickles throughout the world, and we would not have these kinds of threats under a strong leadership. And that is exactly the message the North Koreans are serving to us today.
University student groups across the United States are hosting Israel Apartheid Week events. Lisa, they're protesting what they refer to as the Jewish state's alleged crimes against humanity and its occupation of Palestine.
Yeah, this is horrific, Hal. I've covered a lot of this and been on a lot of college campuses, actually a lot of state schools where you're using taxpayer money to spew this kind of hatred and anti-Semitism right in the middle of campus, meaning those people who are passing by, the students who do not know or do not have a background in the history of the region or current events about what's going on in the world, just walk away with this feeling of anti-Semitism against Jews, targeting them on campus. It is no surprise right now, Hal, that there are reports showing that the number of anti-Semitic attacks in the United States right now is the #1 hate crime, have exponentially increased year after year, including in the last 3 months. And they continue to rise. And it starts out with large institutions like this. When you have members of Congress like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and AOC spewing hatred and anti-Semitic tropes from their positions, from their seats in Congress, when you have universities not putting a stop to this kind of hatred, I mean, swap this anti-Semitism with racism or with any other isms, with any other type of hatred, and it would not be tolerated in our social justice-oriented world right now. But yet, anti-Semitism gets a pass. You look at Instagram, social media, you look at Hollywood and all of the remarks and stereotypes that continue. You turn on any Netflix show, Hal, and there's always these stereotypical remarks that are made about Jews. And it has to stop. I mean, you have, people like Kanye, you have, influencers, beauty influencers who know nothing about the region. They know nothing about the news, but yet they take on this cause as a social justice cause. And it has to stop. And again, it has to stop from the top down. The leaders at these universities, the administration, our own government, I mean, all places where people are in power, they need to stop this so that we can stop our next generation from going forward with this kind of hatred.
Lisa, there are reports that the U.S. Centers for Disease Control bought phone data to monitor Americans' compliance with lockdowns during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the CDC paid one firm $420,000 and another $208,000. That bought access to location data of at least 55 million cell phone users. Unbelievable.
Yes. Just incredible. I mean, nothing surprises us at this point right now with what was done to the free world during the pandemic and how we were lied to, controlled, censored, and now followed. When you think about, what was done and what tools were misused and abused in order to track people, in order to control what they say on social media, in order to shut down any sort of questioning. Think about it. You were not even allowed to ask your employer, your doctor, your hospital about anything having to do. I mean, imagine if you have heart disease and you go in and ask your doctor some questions about the medication that they prescribed. Of course it's okay. I mean, that's what we're encouraged to do. But yet during the pandemic, none of this was allowed. And they tried to control us. And now after 3 years, all of this is rising to the surface. But I ask the question many times a day, I mean, how will this affect us going forward? Will we now no longer trust the institution of medicine or pharmaceutical companies or anything, or of course, social media that tries to control our every thought? But how will we learn from this going forward to really question and be able to be our own advocates when our children go to school and come home with a certain curriculum, learning something that we don't agree with? I mean, will we become more brave or will we become more controlled? And that's really the apex that we're at right now.
Good questions, absolutely. The U.S. Federal Reserve says it was aware of Silicon Valley Bank's risky practices over a year before it collapsed. Now, the New York Times reported that the Fed issued 6 citations after finding serious weaknesses in the bank's handling of risks during a review back in 2021.
Right. And whose fault is it and who's going to take the responsibility? Well, it's going to fall on the people, as always. Look, this we're living in a world where we were told there's no risk of inflation or recession, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're fine because Biden was creating jobs, but yet we were paying $10 for eggs. And, this continued for a very long time, and people just chugged along, and they paid for the gas, and they paid for the eggs, and they paid for everything. And we were told that it's because of the pandemic, it's because of the war in Ukraine, and it's because of this, and it's because of that. And yet it just continues. And this mismanagement of the banks, a lot of it is because of woke policy. If you're following these stories, many of these hires in the top positions were not based on merit or people who were qualified for the job, but because of quotas. They weren't based. They gave out these charities to social justice groups when they weren't in a position to give out this much charity. Why? Because they wanted to keep up with the Joneses in terms of being, of course, aware of these social justice movements and really just keep up in that way. When will this all end? When will we get transparency? And how is it that now in the year 2023, when we have all of these tools at our disposal, we have social media, we have Google, we have all ways of looking, into things, and yet we have so much hidden from us. We are being lied to more than ever in our history. And here you go, the banking system really almost at a collapse. So many of these banks still being really on the verge of collapse, and people panicking. I don't know, Hal, if you saw the footage of a lot of the lines that were out the door last weekend here in the United States, people trying to they're panicking and trying to pull their money out of several of these banks who are on the verge of collapse. It's not a good feeling to be working so hard and being so fearful of what tomorrow will bring.
American journalist and host of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.
The 2023 Alberta election will be here before you know it, and it looks like it'll be a close battle. We're joined today by Drew Barnes, who is the independent MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat. Welcome back to Bridge City News. Drew, great to have you on again.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, so you decided not to run under the banner of the United Conservative Party, but will you be running as an independent candidate?
Well, thank you for that question. I'm still researching it, and I'm talking to mostly my constituents, who about half of them want me to continue in that way. And then I've been talking to give or take 20 other conservative Albertans, mostly in rural Alberta, who are interested in doing something together, whether that's a party or a loosely connected group of independents. So yeah, in the next 2 weeks, I'll be making my final decision. But it's so important that Alberta families be in charge, that Alberta be the freest, most prosperous place. And we'll see what the next 2 weeks brings.
Yeah. Okay. So Drew, what were your overall thoughts on the recent provincial budget?
Oh, I was very disappointed. First of all, Premier Smith and the UCP missed the chance to really help the affordability crisis that families are undergoing right now. They could have cut taxes, end the 2% small business tax to help small businesses, raise the personal exemption so all families, all Albertans paid less taxes. And what they did instead was come up with a mechanism for a handout here, a handout there, picking winners and losers, picking favorites. It's so disappointing. And also what's disappointing to me is they're estimating that oil and gas royalties are going to be up from $3 billion to about $16 billion. Actually, last year, oil and gas royalties hit $27 billion, thank goodness. And they're increasing spending, $13 billion. By the same amount, they're increasing oil and gas taxes up. So it's just another spending government rather than cutting taxes and leaving families and individuals in charge.
Yeah, interesting. So you were hoping to see some broad-based tax relief for Albertans in the provincial budget. Are there some specific areas maybe that need to see some tax changes?
There sure are. First of all, this inflationary crisis we're going through, and it's laughable. The Federal Reserve in America, the central bank in Canada, is raising interest rates through the roof, really testing the affordability for Alberta families. And at the same time, governments are spending more, throwing fuel on the fire. It's crazy. So what I would have liked to have seen, right now, no Albertan pays Alberta tax till they make over about $19,000. I would have liked to have seen that risen to $30,000. So all Albertans have more opportunity to have more money in their pockets and invest in their needs and their future. Secondly, the small business tax. Alberta and Manitoba have already Saskatchewan and Manitoba have already reduced their small business tax to zero. Alberta's paid 2% on top of our 10% federal small business tax. Let's reduce that to zero. Small businesses had such a tough time during COVID. Let's give people an incentive to get off the couch and give us services. And then thirdly, back to our 10% flat tax. Alberta attracted a lot of capital, a lot of quality individuals under Ralph Klein when we had a 10% flat tax. Of course, Rachel Notley raised that to 15 on top of Justin Trudeau raising the federal tax to 34%. So we can pay as high as 49% tax in this province. It's time to give hardworking Albertans a break.
Okay, so Drew, what do you foresee as the biggest election issues this spring? Is it all about affordability?
It's mostly about affordability and the fact that we've seen, healthcare in crisis. We've seen our education system slip. We've seen government utilities and no competition in the insurance or other industries like telephone, cable, and airlines. So Albertans know that our government systems are broken, and they're asking for more money to be left in their pocket so they have a better chance. Now there's some other issues. Crime, the fact that crime has snowballed. So many of our cities are not safe, particularly in our downtowns. People are asking for democratic reform. They've seen nominations be meddled in. They've seen, politicians not be accountable, and they're looking for change that way. And then the third thing is affordability, lower taxes.
Wow. Okay, so speaking of affordability, should the provincial government continue to offer affordability relief payments to seniors and families with kids? I mean, it's a good thing, but I feel like there's so many people that are left out of that piece of the puzzle. So what about people who have older kids living at home, like say a university student, for example? They're basically still dependents because they can't work full time. They're still students.
Exactly, and more expensive needs and a more expensive life. I would like to see the Alberta government focus on two things. First of all, spend less so they can tax less. Let's let all Albertans keep more money in their pockets so they have a chance to direct their own future and they have a chance to end some of this inflation. But secondly, competition. Our utilities are so not competitive. We all know when we open a utility bill, our incendiary costs are as higher than our natural gas or our electricity uses. We know in insurance, I just saw a report that again shows that Alberta has the highest car insurance in all Canada. It is so time to make these industries more competitive so Albertans have more choice and we can get some more competition and better pricing.
Okay, Drew, the Alberta Sovereignty Act will likely get some attention this spring, and I understand that you agree with some of the principles in the Act. So are there some changes that you would like to see in the Act?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, we all know that Alberta sends over $25 billion a year to Ottawa, which large parts of it make its way to Quebec and the Maritimes. I just saw a report that shows that the Quebec Generational Fund, which the province of Quebec is saving money for their children, is now larger than the Alberta Heritage Trust Fund. So, our money being rerouted where it's not going to help our kids. So absolutely, this is important that we do it. First of all, it's time for us to start to use the notwithstanding clause in the Canadian Constitution, even if at times if it's just symbolic. And when it comes to the Alberta Sovereignty Act, if Ottawa is overstepping our into Alberta jurisdiction, like they are with the carbon tax, like they are with not giving us resource movement, it is so time to step in and insist on that happening. And if it doesn't happen, asking Albertans to hold Ottawa accountable.
Okay, let's switch gears here for a second. Healthcare, it's a big one. So the NDP will likely campaign hard against any moves towards privatization. But if we just keep throwing more money with the same system, nothing seems to change. So what would you like to see happen to create better healthcare, Drew? For example, how can we reduce wait times for surgery?
Oh, you're absolutely right. They've been throwing more and more money at it. This year's budget, which was just released last week, healthcare is over $26 billion. The more per year, that's 40% of what Alberta spends, and Alberta government spending too much. And throwing money at it doesn't make our solutions any better. There's some real things we need to do. First of all, we need to return to more local decision making, where local people have control over what happens in their area. Secondly, when it comes to wait times, I'm hearing about inefficiencies throughout the systems. Procedures being late, procedures not being organized. And Alberta Health Services bureaucracy budget is now $600 million a year. It is so time to insist on value for that. But then we also have to get innovative. Hey, Mayo clinics. Let's maybe have a not-for-profit Mayo clinic somewhere in Alberta, publicly funded, so everybody gets equal access. But let's put in some choice and competition. Likewise, we need some wait time guarantees that if you can't get your surgery in a normal period of time, you get the opportunity to go to a different clinic, like a private clinic, again, publicly funded, but you get access to make that happen. The report that came out in the healthcare budget a week ago shows that very, very few, if any, of our procedures do we meet the Canadian standard for wait times, and it's just so broken.
Oh, it is. Any ideas also on how to attract and retain family physicians?
Yeah, two things we got to do. There's so many good Alberta kids that want into medical school. There's not enough spots for them. The bar it's the number of kids that approach my office with perfect grade point averages and great volunteer records that can't get into medical school. It's amazing. So let's start to train a whole bunch of Alberta kids to be doctors. And at the same time, nurse practitioners. Nurse practitioners, an area that we don't use enough, and provide excellent service. Let's not only start to train more nurse practitioners, but let's give them billing access so they can charge the Albertan taxpayer for their services as well. And then let's start to bring the whole budget in line so we make sure we, the people of Alberta, get value for the taxes we spend.
You brought up an interesting point there, Drew. What is going on with the post-secondaries that the local kids can't get in?
You know, it just makes you wonder. We need direction from the government that they have to accept more Alberta kids. There's a number of foreign medical students in there, and that's good. But if we need more spots, let's fund more spots. I also think that, the spots now are in Edmonton and Calgary, of course, with our two big universities. Why don't we look at putting some spots in communities like Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, Grand Prairie, and Red Deer? Maybe we have to streamline kids into medicine as well. A lot of them get in at 26, 28 years old. So by the time they start to help Albertans, they're well into their working lives. Maybe it's time to streamline that. And we, the people of Alberta, just have to get insistent and serious about demanding that instead of going to Montana for our knee or our hip replacement or waiting months to get into our system here, that we get support for all these high taxes we pay.
And then, of course, what about our senior citizens? Do we have enough seniors' homes and staff for them?
Well, I'm concerned about that. We saw during the COVID crisis that many of the great hardworking senior care assistants were working in 2, 3, or 4 of these places, stretched already very, very thin. So I think it's important that we make sure that the right amount of taxpayer money is focused there. Partly we have to stop caring about politics and ideology, and we have to focus more on the senior needs. I'm grateful to represent Cypress Medicine Hat for over 11 years, but one of the things that's happened when the NDP was in power, they seemed to want to go mostly towards publicly owned senior citizen support places. When the Conservatives in power, we want to go more to private ones. I think it's time to make sure that all types of services, including not-for-profit, are there to support our hardworking seniors and make sure that they're there when they need to be.
Do we need maybe more workers to help seniors to stay in their own homes longer, perhaps?
Absolutely, a fantastic idea. And I think we should even maybe look at some family members doing that. One of the things I've talked about for 11 years is what you call a volunteer tax credit, where if you decide to stay home to help your mom or dad stay in their home longer, if you decide to do that with a neighbor, you should have some kind of small or whatever, we should discuss how much tax credit off your income, so you're supported for doing that. And that, you're absolutely right. In addition, with training more hardworking healthcare workers so seniors can stay in their home. And I know, carbon tax and gas and all these things are expensive, but it's an important need to make sure we fulfill this.
Okay, well, let's talk energy for a minute here. So the federal Liberals say good news. They want Alberta to just transition away from fossil fuels into green energy. And they say Alberta oil and gas workers will then switch over to new green jobs. So what are your thoughts on what needs to happen for our energy sector?
Well, first of all, the just transition is going to cost Alberta 250,000 jobs. We already know that we're the most environmentally friendly producer in the entire world. Secondly, let's look good old common sense. We look at our utility bills as they add more and more renewables. Our utility bills are only going up. So that tells you that mechanism is not working. And the hypocrisy astounds me. We keep hearing about China and India adding 250 coal-fired electric plants a year. Never mind the fact that in China anyway, they make fertilizer and methanol with coal instead of clean-burning natural gas. And here we are not adding liquefied natural gas on the Canadian West Coast so we can get it there. Let's talk realistically about our problems and our issues. Oil and gas, this was one of the tougher winters. We couldn't survive up here without the carbon molecule. And if we really care about pollution and helping the rest of the world, let's get liquefied natural gas to India and China as fast as possible.
Well, real quick, Drew, in a lot of Alberta communities, crime reduction is a real issue. And of course, you mentioned it at the top of the interview here. So it's often tied closely to addiction issues. So are there some maybe practical steps that need to be taken to deal with these issues?
Oh, thank you for that question. Absolutely. I hear about this problem all the time. Number one, let's get people suffering from addictions meaningful help. People, into detox and rehabilitation centers on a timely basis. I always hear about how that just doesn't happen. And let's show that we care. And I've also heard many, many times about how some of the money that's already directed towards helping these people actually encourages them to stay on the streets, because instead of using it for residents, a rental, they end up using it to support their addictions. So it's time that Albertans, it's time that the people that are already being paid to be in that system do everything they can to magnify and get that help to these people quicker. And then the other part is everybody has to understand that there's going to be consequences for their actions. We keep hearing about the 10th crime before somebody's, does some jail time or a meaningful penalty. All Albertans have to understand that there's consequences for their actions, and we need our policing and our justice system to focus deeper on those two things as well.
Thanks so much for being with us today, Drew. We're out of time, but great to have you on again.
Well, thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day.
You as well. Drew Barnes is the independent MLA for Cypress, Medicine Hat. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.